Hello, friends. Today you'll witness the unraveling of a marriage in a single morning. This is the story of Mara and Liam, trapped in their urban apartment. Behind their unspoken words lies a silence that devours everything. Watch closely. Sunlight slanted through the half-drawn blinds of their urban apartment, casting long, unmoving shadows across the cluttered kitchen counter. It was the kind of morning light that pinned everything in place. Mugs half empty from yesterday, a scattering of mail unopened, the faint hum of the fridge, the only sound breaking the stasis. Mara stood by the sink, her back to the room, rinsing a single bowl with deliberate slowness. The water trickled softly, a whisper against the porcelain. But it did nothing to fill the void between her and Liam. He sat at the small table, scrolling through his phone, the screen's glow illuminating the faint lines of fatigue etched around his eyes. 2 missed calls blinked on the notification bar, hers from last night, left unanswered in the digital ether like ghosts of words unsent. They hovered there, accusatory in their silence, numbers pulsing faintly as if breathing, waiting for acknowledgement that might never come. Mara dried her hands on a dish towel, the fabric rough against her palms. She glanced over her shoulder, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. His eyes didn't lift. 4, 5. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of what wasn't said. She moved to the coffee maker, her steps measured on the worn linoleum, each one echoing a pause that stretched longer than the last. Her hand trembled slightly as she grasped the mug, hot ceramic biting into her skin. But she steadied it, pouring with forced calm. The steam rose like a veil, blurring the space between them. Liam shifted in his chair, the scrape of wood on floor a brief intrusion into the hush. He set his phone down, face up, those missed calls still glaring. "Coffee?" he asked, voice flat, not quite a question. Mara nodded, words caught in her throat like thorns. She slid the mug toward him, their fingers brushing for an instant, electric, fleeting, before she pulled back. The contact lingered in the air, unspoken, amplifying the quiet tension that coiled tighter with every breath. She turned away again, busying herself with the counter, wiping at invisible spots. Inside, the anxiety simmered low, a dull ache in her chest. But now it pressed outward, building pressure against her ribs. Silence had always been her shield, wrapping her in the illusion of safety. But this morning, it felt like a noose, tightening with each elongated pause. Liam sipped his coffee, the slurp unnaturally loud in the fog of unsaid things. He watched her, or perhaps the space she occupied, his withdrawal a mirror to her own, both retreating into the fog, the distance widening inch by inch. The phone on the table buzzed once, a vibration that rattled the missed calls into sharper focus. Mara froze, her heart quickening. Would she reach for it? Say something, anything to pierce the veil? Or would the silence claim another day, eroding the fragile thread between them? The camera's unblinking eye catches Mara in soft focus, her fingers twisting the edge of a worn notebook on her lap. The room is a cocoon of muted grays, bookshelves lined with leather spines, a single fern wilting in the corner. Like the therapist's office itself is holding its breath. Dr. Celeste Ward leans forward slightly, her voice a gentle current against the stillness, her dark hair framing eyes that seem to see through the haze. "So, Mara," Celeste says, her tone even, probing without pressure. "You mentioned last time that the silences with Liam have become routine, like a habit you can't quite shake. What does that feel like in the moment?" Mara shifts, her gaze dropping to the notebook's blank pages, pristine and accusing. She forces a small smile, the kind that papers over cracks. "It's just, Easier, you know? We go through our days. Coffee in the morning, work calls piling up. If I bring up the heavy stuff, it might spill over, make everything messier. Silence keeps things steady. Celeste nods, her pen pausing mid-note, the scratch of it the only sound breaking the quiet. Steady. That's an interesting word. Does it feel protective? Or does it leave you feeling isolated? Mara's throat tightens. A subtle hitch she hopes the lens misses. She thinks of Liam's phone on the kitchen counter that morning, screen lighting up with her unanswered voicemail from the night before. A hesitant message about dinner, about maybe talking. It sat there, buzzing once, then silent, like an echo swallowed whole. She hadn't picked it up. Neither had he. Protective, I guess. She murmurs, her voice threading thinner. If I don't say it, it can't hurt, or be thrown back at me. The doctor's eyes hold steady, an observer charting invisible tides. And if you do say it, what then? The question lands like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Mara's chest constricts, the status quo fracturing into something sharper. Heartbeats quickening, palms damp against the leather cover. She imagines the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered, and Liam's face turning away, the distance yawning wider. Fear coils low, not of speaking, but of the echo that might come back. Rejection, or worse, indifference. I don't know, she admits, the words catching. It feels like risking everything. Like once it's out, I can't take it back. Celeste tilts her head, her voice softening further, a bridge over the growing chasm. That risk. What if it's not just about being heard, but about hearing the truth in return? The one you've been holding at bay? Mara's breath stutters, anxiety blooming like fog against glass, blurring the safe lines she'd drawn. The voicemail hums in her mind, unanswered, a symbol of the void widening between them. Is she ready to name it? The dread of that reciprocal truth, the one that might shatter the fragile peace? The air thickens, the question hanging, unresolved, as the camera lingers on her averted eyes. Liam stood in the sterile corridor of the modern therapy center, the fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead like a distant swarm. His thumb hovered over the phone screen, the missed call notification glowing accusingly. Mara, 2 minutes ago. His brow furrowed, a puzzle of confusion etching lines across his face. Why now? After days of this thick, unspoken fog between them, what had finally pushed her to dial? He glanced toward the door of Dr. Ward's office, half expecting her to emerge. But the hallway stretched empty, amplifying the quiet thrum in his chest. Inside the adjacent room, Mara perched on the edge of the leather armchair, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Through the slightly ajar door, left that way by the therapist's hurried exit, she watched him, her breath caught in anticipation. Liam's shoulders tensed as he pocketed the phone, then pulled it out again, staring at the unanswered symbol like it held the key to their unraveling. She could see the distance in his posture, the way he leaned against the wall, not for support, but as if bracing against an invisible tide pulling them apart. Her heart quickened. This call was meant to bridge, but now it loomed as a threat, ready to shatter the fragile peace they'd both clung to. The air between them felt charged, even separated by walls. Liam shifted, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck, eyes darting to the door again. He wanted to know. Needed to pierce the silence that had widened the chasm. But the fear of what her voice might reveal held him back. Mara held her gaze on him a beat longer, willing herself to stay visible, to let this moment demand something more. Yet the quiet pressed in, heavier now, turning her initial spark of hope into a taut wire of readiness. What if speaking only confirmed the cracks she dreaded? She looked away first, eyes dropping to the blank journal on her lap, its empty pages mocking her hesitation. The phone in Liam's hand buzzed faintly, a vibration against his palm. But he didn't answer the silent echo of her call. The question hung unspoken in the hush. Would fear keep them frozen? Or would one raw admission finally shatter the stillness? The kitchen light hummed faintly, casting long shadows across the scarred wooden table where Mara and Liam sat. Remnants of dinner pushed aside like unspoken regrets. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, the spoon scraping the porcelain in a rhythm that filled the void between them. "We need milk," she said, her voice threading into the air like smoke, thin and dissipating. Liam nodded from across the table, eyes on his phone, scrolling through nothing in particular. "Yeah, I'll grab some tomorrow." The words landed softly, but the silence that followed pressed in heavier, a tangible weight on Mara's chest, making each breath feel labored. Fatigue clung to her, like the chill seeping through the window pane. Days blurring into this routine, questions about groceries or bills skirting the edges of what really gnawed at them. She glanced at her empty cup, the once steaming brew now reduced to a faint ring of residue at the bottom, mirroring the hollow ache in her gut. How many mornings had they started like this, filling the space with trivia to avoid the fracture line running beneath? Tessa's words echoed unbidden from last week's park bench confession. "Honesty isn't a bomb, Mara. It's the only thing that doesn't leave you picking up shards." Mara set the cup down, the clink sharp in the quiet. Her fingers tightened around the handle, knuckles whitening. The tiredness ebbed slightly, replaced by a taut coil in her shoulders, a readiness prickling like static before a storm. "Liam," she said, the name hanging there, unfamiliar on her tongue after so many muted days. I want to be honest. About us. This silence. It's killing me." He looked up then, his fork pausing midair, the thickness of the quiet cracking under her voice. His eyes, usually guarded, sharpened with something raw. Challenge, maybe. Or the same exhaustion mirrored back. "Honest about what?" he asked, direct. The question slicing through the fog. No evasion, just the weight of it, pulling them both toward the edge. Mara's pulse quickened, the empty cup staring back like an accusation. Was this enough? These safe orbits around the rift? Or would it swallow them whole? The park bench creaked under Tessa's shifting weight, the late afternoon sun filtering through leaves like hesitant whispers. Mara clutched her bag, fingers tracing the edge of a forgotten journal inside. Its pages stark white, untouched, a silent accusation. They had come here to catch up, but Tessa's eyes, sharp as shattered glass, betrayed the ambush. "You're fading, Mara," Tessa said, voice low but unyielding, slicing through the rustle of wind. "That calm mask, it's not peace, it's a tomb. I used to see fire in you, the girl who argued with professors, who laughed loud enough to drown out storms. Now, you're a ghost in your own life, tiptoeing around Liam like one wrong word will shatter everything." Mara's stomach twisted, anxiety coiling tight, her breath shallow against the fog of unsaid words. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the familiar pull to retreat warring with the heat rising in her chest. "It's not that simple, Tess. We're just careful. After everything, careful." Tessa leaned in, her impatience a spark igniting the air between them. "This isn't careful. It's cowardice. Your silence is killing you both. Liam's withdrawing too, matching your quiet like some twisted game. If you don't speak soon, it'll all crumble. Not with a bang, but with this endless, suffocating nothing. Do you want that? To lose him because you're too scared to be seen? The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of dread spreading through Mara. Her hand slipped into the bag again, brushing the journal's cover, blank pages mocking her empty resolve. Had silence stolen even this space for truth? She felt exposed, raw, the facade cracking under Tessa's gaze. But beneath the worry, something stirred, a flicker of resolve, hot and insistent. I want to be honest, Mara whispered, the admission trembling on her lips, surprising even herself. It wasn't a full break, not yet, but the first fracture in the wall she'd built. Tessa's nod was fierce, urging her on, as the park's hush pressed in, waiting for the sound that might finally echo back. The therapy room felt like a held breath, walls the color of faded parchment, absorbing sound rather than echoing it. Mara sat rigid on the edge of the couch, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, knuckles whitening as if anchoring herself against an invisible tide. Dr. Ward, across from her in the armchair, leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady but unyielding, a quiet invitation to the storm Mara had been dodging for weeks. Ward reached to the side table, her movement deliberate, and lifted a simple leather-bound journal, its pages pristine and empty, like a canvas mocking the blank spaces in Mara's life. She placed it gently in Mara's lap, the weight of it surprisingly solid. A silent challenge. "Write it," Dr. Ward urged, her voice a low hum breaking the hush. "The fear, the ache, the things you've buried. Let the paper hold it so you don't have to. It's a bridge, Mara. A way to practice the truth before you offer it to him." Mara's hands trembled as she traced the cover, the leather cool against her skin. Anxiety peaked, a wave crashing inward, visions of Liam's retreating back flashing like warnings. But then, something shifted. A faint exhale, the first crack in the dam. Relief flickered at the edges, tentative like dawn-piercing fog. She flipped it open, the blank page staring back. Not accusing, but waiting. Could she trust this void with her secrets? Pour out the silence that had suffocated her, word by word, and step toward the light. The question hung there, unanswered, as her pen hovered. The apartment hummed with the low drone of evening traffic outside. But inside, the air was thick, suspended like breath held too long. Mara stood by the kitchen counter, her fingers tracing the rim of an empty cup. Another ritual drained hollow. Liam sat across from her at the small table, his shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the photo frame between them. It was their favorite. The two of them laughing on a rain-slicked street, the glass intact, but for the hairline fracture she'd noticed weeks ago, spiderwebbing from an unseen drop. He broke first, his voice a low rumble cracking the frost. "I can't do this anymore, Mara. The silence. It's like you're already gone." His words hung, sharp as shards, and she froze, her pulse a distant echo in her ears. The room's quiet had always been their shield, a mutual agreement to skirt the edges of hurt. But now, Liam's gaze pinned her, raw and unyielding. "Every day, I come home to this wall you've built. I feel like a ghost in our own life, lonely even with you right here. Your quiet deceives me, makes me think we're fine when it's killing us." Mara's throat tightened, the familiar chill of retreat creeping in, urging her to nod, to deflect with a smile. But his pain seeped through, thawing the ice around her chest. She saw it then, the fracture in the frame mirroring their bond, cracks born not of impact but neglect, the weight of unsaid words pressing until something had to give. Liam leaned forward, his voice trembling but steady. "I'm terrified of losing you for good. Tell me, Am I imagining this distance? Or is it real and you've already decided? The question landed like a key turning in a rusted lock, her defenses cracking just enough to let vulnerability flicker. She opened her mouth, the words hovering on the edge of revelation. The silence no longer a safe harbor, but a sinking ship. The frame glinted under the dim light, its hidden breaks whispering of what might shatter if she stayed frozen. Could she hear it? The cost of her protection, and finally answer? Mara sat at the scarred oak desk in the dim glow of her office, the city's muffled hum filtering through the half-drawn blinds like a distant whisper she couldn't quite hear. The journal lay open before her, its blank pages staring back, vast, unforgiving expanses of white, mocking the weight she carried. Dr. Ward's words echoed in her mind. Write the truth, Mara. Let it breathe. But truth was a blade, sharp and hidden, and her pen hovered, trembling, above the first line. Anxiety coiled in her chest, a tight knot pulling her shoulders inward. She scratched a word, Liam, then erased it, the faint gray smear a ghost of intent. The silence in the room thickened, her own breath the only sound, ragged and uneven. What if these words shattered everything? The secret she'd buried for months, the one that gnawed at her in the quiet hours, the fleeting affair during their last trip, born of loneliness she hadn't voiced. Not love, but a desperate grasp at feeling seen. To confess it now would crack the fragile shell of their life, expose the rot beneath her careful calm. Her fingers tightened on the pen, knuckles whitening. She couldn't postpone this. The blank pages demanded it, their emptiness a mirror to the void between her and Liam. Fear surged, rejection's cold sting the fracture she dreaded. But denial was a lie she'd lived too long. With a sharp inhale, she pressed the nib to paper. Words tumbled out, hesitant at first. I need to tell you something I've hidden because I was afraid. The anxiety peaked, a storm in her veins, as the secret uncoiled, details spilling like ink from a tipped bottle, raw and unfiltered. By the third page, the knot loosened. Liberation seeped in, tentative as the truth took form. The guilt, the ache for honesty that silence had only amplified. The journal, once barren, now held her vulnerability, pages no longer empty but alive, with the risk she'd finally voiced. She paused, heart pounding, wondering if these words could bridge the chasm, or widen it forever. Could she hand this to him? Break the hush that had bound them? The pen stilled, but the question lingered, unanswered in the hush. The park huddled under a brittle November sky, leaves shivering on branches like unspoken words caught in the wind. Mara arrived first, her breath fogging the air, hands buried in her coat pockets where the folded letter burned against her palm. The secret inside it, a year-old rejection she'd buried to spare them both pain, felt heavier than the frost glazing the benches. Every delay twisted like betrayal, widening the chasm between her and Liam. She couldn't let the cold seal it shut. Liam appeared at the path's end, his silhouette blurred by the haze, collar turned up against the chill. They met at their old spot, a weathered picnic table scarred by time, but no easy smiles bridged the gap. He nodded, eyes guarded, the silence between them thick as the fog rolling off the pond. Mara's heart hammered, anxiety coiling in her chest like the bare roots twisting underground. She had to speak now, or the words would freeze forever. I brought something, she said, voice barely cutting the quiet. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out the letter, the paper crisp and accusing. Liam sat across from her, close enough to touch but worlds away, his gaze flicking to the page. She unfolded it slowly, the ink her confession in black. The night she'd overheard his doubts, the fear that had locked her tongue ever since. As she began reading aloud, her words hung fragile in the air. I've been silent because I thought it protected us, but it's killing what we have. The anxiety surged, a wave crashing against her ribs. Liam leaned in, his face paling, the alienation in his eyes cracking like thin ice. No interruptions, just the rustle of wind and her voice gaining strength, turning fear into deliberate choice. The truth spilled out, her hidden hurt, the rejection she'd imagined into a wall. From her bag, she drew the empty cup, remnant of their morning coffee ritual, now drained and cold, mirroring the hollow routines that had sustained them. She set it between them, a silent offering. "This is us," she whispered, voice quivering but unbroken. "Empty because we've poured nothing real into it." Liam's hand hovered, then rested on the table, inches from hers. The frost seemed to lift, revelation dawning in the space between, trust teetering on the edge of rebirth. But in the hush, as her final words faded, the question lingered. Had she truly shattered the silence, or would the cold reclaim them? The frost clung to the park bench like unspoken regrets. The November air, a sharp blade slicing through the hush between them. Mara stood before Liam, her breath fogging the space, the folded letter trembling in her gloved hands. The empty cup from their morning ritual, forgotten on the bench's edge, its rim cracked like a fragile truce, mirrored the void she'd carried for a year. She had hidden this rejection, a gallery's curt dismissal of her paintings, letting it fester in silence while their shared days drained away. I need to read this," she said, her voice a fragile thread pulling against the wind. Anxiety knotted her chest, a vice tightening as she unfolded the paper, words blurring through unshed tears. Liam's eyes, shadowed under the bare oaks, fixed on her, wary, waiting. He hadn't spoken since they arrived, his withdrawal a mirror to her own old habits. But now the tension hummed between them, electric and inevitable. "Dear Miss Finch," she began, the words scraping out like ice shards. "We regret to inform you that your submission does not align with our current vision." Each syllable landed heavy, the hidden wound spilling into the cold. Her heart raced, fear clawing that this truth would shatter them, leave her raw and alone. But she pressed on, voice gaining a ragged edge. The polite barbs, the erasure of her dreams, the lie she'd told herself. That silence spared him the burden, spared them both. Liam's face crumpled, pain etching deep lines around his mouth. He leaned forward, fists clenched in his coat pockets, the bench creaking under the shift. "A year?" His voice broke, raw with betrayal, yet laced with something softer. Recognition. "You carried this alone. All those nights I thought it was us, the distance. It was this?" Hurt flickered in his eyes, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he reached for the empty cup, fingers tracing its barren curve as if seeking solace in its hollow echo. The symbol of their emptied routines, once warm with coffee and easy talk, now underscored the ache. What had been full was parched, waiting. Mara's anxiety ebbed into a dawning clarity, the act of speaking unburdening her like frost melting under reluctant sun. She folded the letter, meeting his gaze. "I was scared it'd break us more, but hiding it, that's what did." The air thickened, their breaths sinking in the chill. His pain a bridge, her vulnerability an offering. Understanding dawned in his nod, tentative as he stood, closing the gap. The unsaid no longer a wall, but a door cracking open. Could they truly hear each other now? shape this truth into renewal or a gentle farewell? The park held its breath, the choice hanging in the fragile quiet.